Alright, guys, welcome back to the podcast. Welcome back to Game and Compute. On this podcast, we talk about finances, income, economy, money, career, jobs, everything along those lines. Today, I wanted to talk about this clip that I came across on about Dave Ramsey. There's a guy who called in asking about his remote job, and I don't know if he called in or wrote in about having a remote job. At this remote job, this guy has two remote jobs, or maybe he had a question about, is it okay to work two remote jobs? And Dave Ramsey said absolutely not. It's not okay to work two remote jobs if you're doing it behind the company's backs. Or maybe this was Ken Coleman saying this too, or maybe one of them, I don't know. But it's not okay to work two remote jobs if you're doing it behind the company's backs. If it is okay, then why wouldn't you just forthcomingly tell the jobs that that you're doing remote work for two different sites? So he says it's not okay. They say it's not okay, but I think there was one aspect that they were missing. One aspect. So that's assuming that the remote jobs, that somebody's overlapping two remote jobs during, like, say they're working one job 8 to 4, one job 9 to 5. And maybe they have like an hour gap at the beginning, hour gap at the end, where they can do some extra work, but then it's like, overall they're doing half the work for each job during a full day shift, and then getting, like, say double the pay or something like that, from hiding that maybe one job doesn't seem like it has so many responsibilities, and you can technically add a second job while you're doing it. So that's what people kind of assume was being said. And then I kind of took it in my mind to another area, and I was thinking, like, well, what if this person is working legitimately two jobs, like one job that's maybe like 6 hours a day, and a second job that's about 6 hours a day, and they're working remotely, and they're getting, or maybe if it's like 7 hours, maybe even, because then you'd still get like benefits, and you'd still be a full-time employee if you're working 32 hours at most jobs. Well, not most jobs, but a lot of jobs would still consider 32 hours to be good. And then there's just like a lot that gets paid off, that gets there's a lot that you're trying to basically have two remote jobs lying to one company, both companies, versus having two remote jobs, and you're actually working two remote jobs that are separate jobs that aren't, you're not working 8 hours a day getting two incomes. You're working two shifts per day, getting two incomes. Now I feel like that is different. If you're getting two incomes a day, then what would you be doing wrong? I don't think that's doing anything wrong if you're working two remote jobs and you're working two separate shifts. I do kind of see the argument about if you have a job, one job doesn't have too many tasks, so that you can actually, be very flexible in your day with that job, and it's not interfering with anything. I could see how somebody would rather add a second job just because you can make more money. But it's kind of like, yeah, that is a little bit different. But it kind of depends on the model too of the job. Like if you're doing something, for example, that would be frowned upon versus if you're doing something that they know is okay. So say, for example, if you have to sit by the phone all day and wait for calls, but they only log the time that you have calls coming in and the calls that you take, and then however long it takes for you to write that note about the call. Say if that's the job and you don't have a lot of calls coming in consistently, and there's no way you can make it so that more calls come in, and literally it's just like a waste of your daytime. I can kind of see that argument. Like, I'm not really saying that it's completely like ethical, but it's like I can kind of see that argument because it is kind of wasting your day. If for example, you only get one call an hour and the one call takes you 10 minutes, then you really have 50 minutes extra every hour that you could be doing other stuff. And if you have another job that's maybe equally as flexible, I can kind of see how someone would take that as like, okay, this should be okay for me to do because I'm not breaking any rules of my current company. Like, literally, if I wasn't on those 10-minute calls every hour, I would literally just be sitting there staring, waiting for the next hour till the next call comes in on the hour. If that's literally the job, then that I feel like might be a little bit different. But then again, I do kind of agree that it is kind of going behind somebody's back if you, if you're not willing to be openly telling them what you're doing and you're still kind of hiding it, and they don't know that you're working a second job. I mean, it's kind of like you're withholding the information. Is it wrong to withhold the information when you're not breaking any of your job's rules and you're not doing anything wrong according to your job's rules? Is that wrong? That's kind of what I don't really know. I don't really know if it's doing something wrong if you're not, I don't really know. I just can't really say if you're doing something wrong. It's really hard to tell. I would say that, yeah, if you do have to go behind someone's back, you're not being completely honest and forthcoming about it. If you know that, like, withholding the information, if they found out, then they'd be mad. But also I can see, how people would want to justify that I'm literally not doing any other thing ever during that other time period when nobody's on the phone with me. And it's not like, if you don't have the type of job where you can go like above and beyond and just like call other people or whatever, and that's literally your job, then I don't really know what really would be wrong with having a second job that's equally as chill. Because it is kind of a waste of time to be 8 hours sitting doing something where you're not really doing that. But if you are taking time from either company that's paying you, and you're just getting money from them, I can understand how people would have a problem with that. So I don't know. It is complex. Like, I can kind of see it both ways. I do understand the fact that, if you're not willing to be open and tell them, then is it really okay? But I also think, too, with work, sometimes, there are plenty of situations where people are not open or forthcoming with their jobs because, they want to get theirs, right? the employer wants to get theirs, the employee wants to get theirs. So for example, something that kind of happens at my site that I've kind of noticed is if you're a high performer at your site, you kind of like, when they're trying to decide like who to add more onto the caseloads, they kind of make it seems like an economic decision for the company. They'll choose the higher performer to take on the new clients, because maybe they'll have better rapport, or maybe basically it's a money game, right? It's like they'll have higher rapport, they'll keep the clients more, the clients will engage with them more, and that means since the client's engaging, the company gets paid more. They get reimbursed more by the insurance because the company is getting paid, right? The company's getting paid more often. Versus, if they gave the newer clients to the not so well performing, employees, then, their money, for someone who can't engage a client as often, if there's not good rapport, or if, there's just maybe not that the other person doesn't do good work, but, they're likely to try to maximize the money coming into the company by giving clients to the people who perform well. So then it's kind of like, well, what's the incentive for performing well? Because if I perform at 50%, I'm not saying that there are coworkers that are performing at 50%. I'm just trying to make an example here. If I were to perform at 50%, I'd still be meeting the minimal requirements for the job, and I wouldn't have to have as many clients. And so, I'd be able to free up more of my energy by them not, adding more people to my caseload. So why should I have a higher caseload than someone else who's doing the same job, because they're still meeting the minimal requirements, and so am I, but they decide, okay, you need this many clients. It's something I kind of pay attention to. I've seen, situations where some staff have like maybe half of the amount of clients than as another staff. And it's kind of like, okay, like that doesn't seem fair, that one staff can keep half of the clients, half of the caseload of the clients, and then another staff is getting piled on more and more clients. And in stressful situations, it's like you only get clients because the clients are overwhelmed with managing their own issues. And so that in turn overwhelms your schedule with having to try to help them manage their own issues. Another question is, why stay in a job where you don't want to have more clients? But then, it kind of also comes to, if a company's going to treat the employees that way and pile on more and more and more, then it almost makes more logical sense to not have that reputation where you get more clients if you don't get anything out of it. The company's getting something out of it. You're not getting anything necessarily out of it in some situations. So that's kind of how I see it too. It's like, okay, like a company might be forcing more on an employee who they see doing better, but then the only incentive is for the company to get more money. You don't see any of that money. And so when it comes to those types of settings, it's a little challenging to be like, who's in the right, who's in the wrong, because the companies know how and why they're making these decisions. They know that they're piling the work onto the workhorse type of staff, and then the other staff that kind of maybe struggle a little bit more, they're not like equally just distributing clients. They're like, well, this person has better engagement with the client. So whenever there's a new client, we'll send it to this person instead of that person, and then it gets to be a point where it's like, okay, well, I see that, I'm doing all this and this and this and that. And you kind of almost start feeling like, okay, I'm one of the people keeping this company afloat, but what am I getting out of this? So I can see if it's a site that's like that. I'm not saying my site's exactly like that, but that's kind of like how I can see some kind of flaws that might come up. That's kind of the feeling that people get. It's kind of like the way it looks, that like the companies kind of use people to get more money. So why can't employees in turn use a company to get their work recognized with higher finances? Why can't an employee exploit some of the company's holes? If you have a job where you're only working technically 10 minutes out of every hour, why can't you exploit that extra 50 minutes? It's like, it's just, I'm not saying that I'm right or wrong or whatever. I'm just saying, like, that's kind of part of a mentality that I kind of can think by as well, where it's like, well, I kind of see the other side too, because I am an employee, and it's like, I kind of see how companies can kind of exploit their employees, and that's what companies do. But at the same time, it's like, it's not really equal for every worker. So when it comes to those kind of settings where it's like, okay, why is this one person doing more work or putting in more energy? Like others of us, we get tired too. We're exhausted too. We burn out too. We need some days off too, But then at the end of the day, it's like, well, you can always just quit your job and go somewhere else. That's kind of the sentiment that we get back. Not exactly at this job. I'm just saying, I've heard, leaders say that kind of thing in workspaces where they're like, well, if you don't like it, you have a choice to leave. And it's not like a threat, but it's more like, if this is affecting your lifestyle so negatively, you can go find a different job that's a better fit for you. And I agree with that too. There might be better jobs that have better pay with a better work-life balance, where you're working one job that pays the amount that those two jobs were paying you. So it's like you're still getting the same amount of income that you would get from the two jobs, but instead you're working one job now for 8 hours. And then, that might be a better fit. But to really find a job that's going to pay you double, not impossible, but it's not always 100% likely. So yeah, I'm just trying to kind of think things through. It's not the easiest thing on the face of the planet, but it's not the hardest thing on the face of the planet. I don't know. It's I'm not saying like, you should always be the bigger person and, not go by the rules that the exploiting companies kind of go by. But, sometimes I think about it and I'm like, you have to be smart and strategic about things, not necessarily trying to lie and put your work at risk or anything like that, but trying to find, ways to get what you want by playing by the rules. And then knowing like what, if it's okay to bend rules, what that looks like, because I think in all honesty, everybody kind of bends a rule every now and then, everybody does something that, isn't maybe like 100% what they should be doing. People on occasion might print, I don't know, like personal documents. Like say if you're gonna mail something through eBay and you might print the shipping label at work because you don't want to use your own printer, or like things like that. It's like, yeah, it's company stuff, but you're using it. You know, you might, take some extra donuts for tomorrow so you don't have to buy breakfast, like, I'm not saying like steal stuff. I'm not saying it's okay. I'm just saying like sometimes it's like a job might provide you something and you have to make a decision. Like, where's the line of what's okay and what's not okay? I do think that is a good motto to go by. If you wouldn't openly tell your job site what you're doing, then there might be something wrong with what you're doing. But also it's like some job sites really screw people too. So it's kind of like, if they're screwing you and you know it, if they're exploiting you and you know it, yeah, the bigger move to do would be to get out of there. But also it's like, I don't know. I mean, like, if someone's exploiting you, that's not okay either. So it's kind of like, and I know how they say 2 wrongs don't make a right, but it's kind of like, does it make you more justified? I don't know. I mean, these are kind of just like questions that I can't really answer. I mean, I think I know the answer, but sometimes it's like there are things that really aren't going to harm your company. Like, before we talked a little bit about the quiet quitting. Quiet quitting is basically like you're doing the bare minimum at your job, a C-level amount of work. Not sea level as in by the ocean, but sea level, like ABC grade level of work, versus doing a little bit above average or a whole lot above average. You're doing average on purpose, just to be able to do more on your passion projects or create more here or there. That's usually what that looks like. But it's hard for me to say, do I advocate for it? Do I not? I think situation by situation, you can think about it more, like, think about, like, if a company lies to somebody, gets them in the door, they start working and they start finding different ways where they can get their own needs met while the company is still getting their needs met. Is that ultimately wrong? It's hard for me to really say fully, because I understand where that comes from. It doesn't necessarily mean that it makes it right. If somebody can get fired from it's not going to be right. But it's like, some people do need that double income. Some people do need that extra money. So it comes down to, you're doing the best for your family. You found a solution. You're not cutting corners anywhere. Maybe you're doing C-level work, but it's also like nobody really cares. People kind of look the other way. Maybe you have like 20 other coworkers who are all doing the same exact thing, and now you're the only one who doesn't want to do it. There's a little pressure behind it. People might make things that are kind of wrong seem a little more right than they are. It's up to the individual at the end of the day. But I do kind of see how they say, like, 2 jobs remotely isn't necessarily the best choice, because your company doesn't know. Both of those companies that you're working for aren't aware that you're doing this. You might not have been forthcoming with them, being like, hey, by the way, I'm already working another full-time job during the same exact hours that you're employing me to work. So I don't know. I mean, that's just kind of how I'm thinking about it. It's like, that's how I think about it. It's like, yeah, it might not necessarily be fully right to do, unless, the hours aren't really overlapping, or unless somebody gives you the go-ahead to do it. Then, I mean, you're in the clear. You can, if you get the go-ahead from both companies, then I guess you're really not going to have any problems with that. But I don't know. It's still complex, right? It's still complicated. issue, and people are tempted to do it because they can. People are tempted to do it because nobody's going to find out. I mean, you'll know. And I'm not here to guilt trip people. I'm more so here to help people see the risk aspect of things. It is risky. At the least, it's risky. It's bordering, some kind of like secret, like secret method to kind of get ahead. But sometimes at the end of the day, if you're really doing no harm to anybody, I don't know. It's complex. I mean, I don't know what you guys think. But I found it to be interesting. It's an interesting topic. But all right, guys. That's it for now. Thanks for listening.